Thomas here, together with a few colleagues and friends and students and learners and community members. Sounds like a bunch, but I'm just giving you a lot of titles here, people. We are in the Work the Web training program. You are the best. And we are trying to learn more about programming and software development in general, but of course web application development in particular. And today the idea is that we will be doing perhaps some code along if you guys want, or at least go through a set of steps that will help us to set up a small application, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, in a as professional way as possible. And I know that we've covered most of these things at least once, but there will be some tweaks and so on. And also we need to remember, or at least I want to remind you about the fact that repetition is the mother of all learning. So we're going to repeat some stuff today, and we're going to do it in a way that that will hopefully build more experience and give you more tools and perhaps some more insights regarding certain steps. But Carl, you mentioned that you took part in a conference. Would you like to tell us about it?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. It's started Friday, which was more introductory, and it's today and tomorrow by the Software Craft and Test Conference. They call it Socrates, and they also call it Unconference. It's actually very interesting in that when it starts, there aren't fixed topics, and they have a World Cafe, which was new to me, and then people suggest sessions, and it's been great. I could tell you more.
The unconference concept or format is really exciting. It's I like that because it allows the community or the attendees of a meeting, meetup, conference, or what have you to drive the content. I think it's fantastic.
It's been great. And one of the sessions I joined was about mob programming, and that was a very popular one, and they even continued it afterwards as an evening session because a lot to say there.
There is this fantastic guy on all the programmer, Woody, I think. Woody, I can't recall his name. He's one of the gurus and ambassadors or evangelists, rather, about that speaks about mob programming highly. I've been to 2 talks by him, but I can't recall his name at this point. I think it's
someone whose name I can't pronounce, who was also one of, I guess, from the beginning, who wrote a book on ensemble programming, because that was also new to me. They were calling it ensemble programming, and I heard that for the first time, and that's like a different name for mob programming.
Okay. In Swedish, we have this saying that kärt barn har många namn, which means that a loved child carries many names. It's a free translation, basically meaning that a phenomena that is used by many can also come in different different names or be called different things. Astras, do you have something like that in Norwegian or Icelandic?
Eating some delicious food.
Kärt barn har många namn. I get it. We can talk about that later. Assembled programming or mob programming or what have you is whatever you call it. It's a great great practice. I think that when you have a topic that you don't know, or like no one in the team is an expert on, you gather 5, 6, 7 people, and you just throw up a problem on the table. We need to fix this together, and somebody drives, like writing the code, and other people have brainstorm ideas. Perhaps you break up in smaller sessions sometimes, and so on, and you solve things together. I think this is a fantastic practice. Good on you attending that and learning more about that, Carl. And you said that this conference is ongoing, so it's going to carry on through today and tomorrow?
So because it's online, it was cheap. And tomorrow, we can all invite someone. So if someone's interested to join it tomorrow, let me know today.
Sure, push that out on the Work the Web 2021 channel, and you probably get a date. Somebody, absolutely. Sounds fantastic. Great stuff. All right, folks. I was thinking that we can do a little bit of coding, and I have some written instructions for that. I will send that in Slack here, and perhaps do these calls, do they carry a chat? No, there's no chat in Slack calls. No. So anyway, if you want to tag along, you can tag along. It's an open gist. So I just created this one. So the idea here is that we will build a small application in CSS, in HTML and JavaScript. And I actually have, let me see if I have some settings. This is a challenge that I do together with my students at Craft Academy. It's the same thing that I do with them. Let me see if I have some address book challenge. Right. I'm just going to go over this really quickly, and you have to forgive me the branding. I didn't prepare this for Agile Ventures. So the address book challenge is about building an address book application that will store name, address, mobile number, and image or avatar, a link in some sort of storage, right? And we're going to build a user interface to that. Now, the challenge itself isn't that super hard because building this kind of apps and this kind of user interfaces, UIs, is not a challenge in itself. But the way we're going to do it is what the challenge is really about. And the learning objectives here is, of course, to put JavaScript to use, work a little bit with asynchronous programming, of course, document object model manipulation. But here comes the interesting thing. We want to persist data using local storage. And I will talk a little bit more what local storage is and how it differs from other storage mechanisms in your browser. And we want to unit test the JavaScript parts of this application using Mocha and Chai, and then some, actually. And you want to do a little bit of introduction to this BDD using Cypress.io. Again, this is a challenge for bootcamp students. You guys already know a lot about Cypress, but I think that repeating that could be very valuable to you. In the context of the bootcamp, we also practice pair programming and collaboration using Git and GitHub. This is something that we probably don't have to do in this setting. And then there's this thing about deploying this static site to the web, to some sort of a server. And again, the last point is also not very relevant for this context, because in my bootcamp, we usually try to connect the things we do in other parts of the curriculum, which involves a lot of Ruby programming, and we want our students to compare Ruby and then JavaScript and how you do things and so on. But we don't have to worry about that in this particular setting. Now, a little bit of repetition for you guys still about behavior-driven development. Now, and there is this misunderstanding. Sometimes we say behavior-driven development, but at other times you hear the expression, this acronym being translated into behavior-driven design. And I've been using them interchangeably. I think I don't really know which one is 100% correct. I'm a very practically oriented guy, so I don't really give a shit about that. But in this presentation, I think I'm choosing BDD as, or translate that into behavior-driven development. And BDD is, nonetheless, it's an agile software development methodology. And what you do is during this process is to document and design your application around the behavior of a user and what he or she expects to experience when interacting with it. I know we spoke about this before, but I think it's worth repeating, because if you want to work in a BDD way, it requires you that you write behavioral tests, which are, again, acceptance tests, or they are also called end-to-end tests, and that they are created before the development starts. And as you know, in the beginning, the behavioral test will go red, it will fail. But as you continuously develop your thing, you implement more and more code, the tests will begin to pass in parts, and at the end it will go green. And once all of the acceptance tests are considered passing, all the scenarios that you can come up with, and they are all going green, the product is ready for shipment, right? And when we say product, it is also kind of elusive, because sometimes it's a feature or part of the entire system, or the entire system itself. It depends a little bit on how big it is and how you work. But that's like a repetition of what BDD stands for and how you work with it, right? And if we think about tapping this BDD process into, or connecting this BDD process into test-driven development, it is playing kind of well, and this is just one way to try to show this in a graphical way or illustrate this. Again, you write a failing test, you make the test pass, and you have the third step of refactoring. But the same process goes on a higher level in this BDD, in this acceptance or behavioral testing, as in unit testing. And you basically work, since you start with the user experience, you start with the behavioral test, and then you move down to the unit level, and then back and forward, right? So you jump between those two layers that in principle may be very similar to each other, but in practical terms are quite different, because one is actually running the entire application, whereas the TDD part is running the individual parts of the program, of the software, independently of the others. So somewhere in between, just to make things a little complicated, between TDD and BDD, you have this integration testing that is making sure that all units are playing well together. I think we all saw this this image that I posted in, I think it was in this channel, wasn't it? Right. This is the one. Oh, this, I don't know if it's going to show so much in on stream, or if you can see this properly, but you see the lock itself works. Like if that would be a unit, you could unit test the lock, and that would definitely work in itself, but not in this particular context, because in this context the door is opening sideways and not you don't push it or pull it, so the lock doesn't serve any purpose whatsoever. And this is just a funny example of how your unit tests can pass individually, but if you don't test them together with others, then they don't make any sense. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, it's of course it's ridiculous, and there are quite a
But
few.
the lock is doing its job.
The lock is doing his job, absolutely. I mean, whoever manufactured the job did a good job. The problem was that whoever made a decision to use this particular lock on this particular door, that's the person who made the mistake here.
He should be fired.
Or shot.
Yeah.
Well, perhaps not shot.
Or drink shots.
Or have
Yes,
a drink shot. Have a drink shot. Let's go for that. All right. So the thing is that's why we test on different levels, so that we can avoid these kind of mistakes. And this integration testing can be implemented in this TDD flow, but the behavior-driven the development is automatically also including integration testing in it, because an acceptance test is per se an integration test automatically. Right. So some more stuff about BDD that I think is valuable to mention is that if you use those practices properly, you can avoid making, I don't know, mistakes or whatever you want to call it. I list three things, three side effects of BDD that are really good. Now, rework is avoided, and rework is often, or rework that is caused by misunderstandings or vague requirements can be avoided effectively. You can avoid accumulating a lot of technical debt, which is usually caused by I'll do it tomorrow kind of attitude, because like in terms of refactoring and so on, right? Because people think that I'm in a hurry, I just need to get this pushed out, and they make decisions that are leading to accumulation of technical debt, like badly formatted code or code repetition or what have you, right? And also, if you work properly, modularize your code, you follow the best practices, it is easier to notice bugs or shortcomings in your code. Onboarding new people, handing over your code to other team members will be much smoother, and so on. So these are some of the side effects of behavior-driven development. Now, let's forget about that and talk a little bit about technical stuff here. Now, in your browsers, where your application live, like this address book will live inside or be executed inside of a browser, there are two mechanisms for storage or persisting data. Now, one of them is local storage and the other one is session storage. Now, local storage is a mechanism that will allow us to store key value pairs, pretty much like objects in JavaScript. You have an attribute and a value, name Thomas, age 49, and so on. We can store those values in a browser. And the good thing with local storage is that there is no expiration date on them, which means that they are bound to a specific URL and specific location, but the data is saved for over time. Like, so if you close your browser and you revisit this site again and open it up again, you will still be able to retrieve that data. Now, session storage is pretty much the same thing as local storage, but the data is cleared when the page session ends. So when you close a tab or you log out of or you just expire a session, not log out, because it has nothing to do. But when you end a session on a specific resource, that data will be wiped. And for us now in this exercise, we will be using local storage, and a lot of these things that we're talking about will be applicable to session storage also. Now, you access local storage and session storage in your Chrome developer tools, and you've probably seen something similar, a similar view to this one. You have your elements, your console, you have some other stuff here, and you have another tab that is called application, and in that application you can access your local storage and session storage and some other stuff, but we're not going to, cookies and so on. We're not going to talk about that. But you can also access all of this programmatically, not only by viewing it in the developer tools like this. Right. Okay. So that's going to be all for that session. I'm actually going to download this for you, so you can get this in in Slack as a PDF. That might be interesting. Let's see, where's my Slack? I don't know. Got it. Where's Slack? Slack, come on. Okay, I can't even find my cursor now, so that's great. Oh, there it is. Work the web, and this intro into address book challenge. There we go. All right. So let's try a few things here. I'm going to open up DevTools on this page, right? And I'm gonna. So here is. Let's see. Make this a little bigger, right? So very similar to what I just showed you. If you click on application, you can see local storage and session storage. You can open this up, and this is the URL, and we can see that there is some content in this local storage. And in terms of session storage, we don't have any content at all, actually. For some reason, this particular website didn't set any storage for us. Now, if we now go to the console, which is the place where we can execute code, we can just type local storage. Local storage is an object or an attribute bound to the window object. So we can say, just for clarity, or so we have this window object, it's huge, and then we can say local storage like this, and we can hit this, and we can see that on this particular website there is quite a lot of information. So we have something called bundle URLs, and that is apparently an object because we can see the curly brackets and so on, but there is it's stored as a string inside of that object. So Daniel has an issue with joining in, apparently. Let's see. Not really. Well, we are on Twitch, right? So we are on Twitch. Could somebody send a link to my Twitch channel in Slack, because I don't have that open? Could do me that favor, I would appreciate that. Thank you very much, Anya. Thank you very much, Castras. Anybody else? All right, so if I would like to access this bundle URLs, then I would say window.local storage, and then bundle, what is it? Bundle dash URLs, right? Well, that's actually not going to work, so we need to use the hard bracket notation. So we would say bundle URLs. No, because I misspelled that. Thank you very much, Thomas. Bundle, there we go. Right, so as you can clearly see, we have we can access the content of this object, but it is stored as a string. And this is a very important piece of information. Whatever we will be storing inside of local storage, it needs to be a string. We cannot store objects or anything else but strings. So if we have an object like this, right, then we have to parse this into JSON. We could do something like JSON.parse and then pass this in, and now you can see that this will be transformed into an object, right? And again, this is for whatever we will be doing in the address book challenge. This is a very important piece of information. Storage can only be in a form in the data that is stored can only be in the form of a string, but we can store it. That string can have a format of an object, so we can parse it into an object later. Does this make sense? Kind of? No, not at all? You want me to repeat? And by the way, hi, Carmen.
Hi. It makes sense. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt.
All right, good stuff. Now, let's say that we want to get rid of this stuff. No, before I say that, accessing. No, actually, let's get rid of this stuff. Now, if I would like to clear local storage, there is a command that is basically you basically execute the clear command, and it's a function, so you need to pass in the parentheses. And if I do that, and if I check what local storage is now, it will be totally empty, right? You can see that length 0, nothing here. So we know that we have a clear command, right? And we can now, I'm going to now demonstrate a few commands that we will be using later on. So taking a few notes will not be out of place. Now, if we want to set a key and store some data in it, so then we can use window.localStorage, or for simplicity, just local storage. We don't need to say window.localStorage actually. But we can say local storage dot set item, and the set item function takes 2 arguments. First, the key name, and then some value like this. And now, if I do that and check what local storage is, you can see that it has foo and some values stored in local storage. And again, as I showed you before, we could say, in principle, local storage.foo like this, and then get the value. But that is actually not the appropriate way to do that. It's much better for us to get into the habit of using not just the set item method, but also get item. Get item is using is taking 1 argument, and the argument is the name of the key, or the name of the attribute, whatever you want to call it. So we say get item and then pass in foo as an attribute, and then we get the value of it. So we have a setter, which is the set item function, and a getter method, which is the get item. All right. So let's say that we would have, two keys in it, right? So we would say baz would be bar. And this is a demo, so I'm just setting nonsense names here, right? So if we say local storage, oh, there we go, local storage. So now we have foo, some value, baz bar, right? And I've already showed you how I can get rid of everything. That would be the .clear method, the one that I used here. But let's say that the only one we want to get rid of is the foo key. We want to keep baz around. That's a use case that is definitely a good one. Will come in play at some point if you use local storage. For that, we can use local storage remove item, I think it is called. Remove item, and then we just say baz for it in this case. We just pass in 1 argument, and that's gonna leave us with just foo left. Okay, so we have a setter, we have a getter, we have a way to remove single attributes, and we have a way to remove the entire content of local storage. Now, in our address book challenge, we will use that local storage to store some data, and I think that's going to conclude my introduction to local storage. If you think one more thing, in terms of session storage, you do the same thing, but basically it's exactly it's exactly the same thing. So it's the same methods. The only thing that differs is that it's called session storage, and you can do the same. You can call the same functions on it. So if we now would say session storage dot set item like this, and check session storage, you will have that. So the name of the functions are the same. The only difference is, as I explained in the beginning, is that session storage is not being persisted, but local storage is. So if we would now open up a new tab, close this one, and open it again, and open up our DevTools, we should be able to get the item foo, and we still see some value, right? But if we would say session, we would take a look at session storage. We don't have that. It's totally empty. The local storage is not. Now we get these things that GitHub set for us, the bundle URLs, because that's the page we're visiting, but you still have foo here, basically. So that is what's happening here. All right, I hope you've been taking notes, because this will come back and hunt us in a while. But we kind of got an introduction to what we will be building. We want to build a simple user interface where a user can store some data about a user, name, email, perhaps phone number, avatar, what have you. That is all explained in that PDF that I sent to you. Now, we're going to go through a little some of the steps that are needed for this. There's a lot of things here that we will go through today. There's some text and descriptions and so on. I'm going to try to follow this along, and if you have any questions, fire away. If you want to do this together with me in this session, that's perfectly fine. If you want to do it on your own later on, that is also fine. What I would like you to do as participants in this camp is to version control this. Make sure you push this app to your GitHub account. Send me the link so I can see that you've done this and how you did it, and you know, if there are multiple commits or if you do everything in one single run, which I would advise against, by the way, and so on. And that could be part of the evaluation that I promise that I will be doing with you guys. Apart from, of course, reviewing your pull requests and your contributions to the project, I want to look at some of the stuff that you've been doing during the Work the Web sessions. Right. So the objective for the first for this session right now will be to set up the folder structure of our application. We want to add the dependencies for running and testing the application, and then we want to configure the dependencies to run this. Not only add those, but we want to configure those dependencies, because there will be a bit of configuration. And one thing that is important to understand and to grasp and to separate mentally is that configuration is not programming. Configuration is the things that we need to go through to set up the stage for us to be able to work on and create software as we move forward. So I know this might sound discouraging to you guys, but all of the steps that we will be going through today are not programming at all. We will just be doing some configuration, actually. And these are the steps that I want you to go through, repeat with me. In the next session, we will actually code more on this as we move forward. At some point, I will run out of documentation. It depends a little bit on how fast I am. If we make it to the bottom, then I can freebase a little bit of things, because we're going to have to do a little more config than this this section actually documents or brings to the table. So I will get started. I will open up my terminal. Just for some reason here. Move this. Oops. Let me here. Make this a little bit bigger. Whoops. Go through. That's right. So I'm gonna jump into the Agile Ventures. Or do I have a work the web CD work? Okay, let's see. LS. Right. No, I can create this here. So I'm gonna do. I'm gonna create, and this is actually not documented. I just saw that. So I'm gonna create a new folder, and I'm gonna I'm just gonna call it address book. Work the web, so I know that it's a different version, and I'm gonna CD into this one. And the next step for me will be to initiate a new yarn project in this one, or npm if you rather use that. That's perfectly fine. But I like yarn, so I'm going to use this one. And again, I'm passing in the flag saying yes, so I don't have to answer all the questions that pops up. It saves me a few seconds. And then I want to install some of the test dependencies. And I'm going to talk you through this one. You've probably been hearing me talk about this before, but I'm gonna use Mocha, and I'm also gonna use Chai, and I'm gonna use Sign-On, and I'm gonna use Sign-On Chai. Sign-On Chai is a connector between Sign-On and Chai assertions. Now, Mocha is a testing framework. Chai is an assertion framework, or assertion library, sorry. Sign-On helps us to stub, mock, and spy on objects, and Sign-On Chai allows us to connect or assert that Sign-On has worked properly. I'm going to use another one that is called Bdd lazy var. And if you haven't heard me talk about this before, Bdd lazy var is an extension to Mocha that helps us structure with structuring our tests in a way that brings some clarity to it. I don't know if you will agree with me on this one, but for me, that is, I've been testing for a long time. It brings a better structure. And Carmen, I know that you come from the Rails community, so it helps Mocha and Chai to achieve a look and feel that resembles RSpec from Ruby, from the Ruby world, and I like that. And then I'm also going to add the start server and test library, and I also going to add Cypress at the same time. It's a handful. Hopefully I didn't make any mistakes, many spelling mistakes. Bdd lazy var, start server and test, Cypress. And all of these dependencies will be stored as development dependencies or dev dependencies, and that's why I have this capital D flag on the yarn add command. And that will take a short while. Hopefully not too long. Now, Cypress recently released a new version, so I don't know if we're in version 8 something nowadays, I don't know. It can take a little while to download, but it should be probably okay. I hope. Does any one of you have had any experience with local storage or session storage before? Or was this totally new to you guys?
So long ago and so briefly.
Right. New stuff. All right.
I think
Good.
Anya was also gonna say something.
Yeah, no, for me it's completely new. Definitely.
All right. There's a lot of hidden gems in the browser. So that's is Mikey drawing smileys? Oh God, you're collaborating on drawing. That's fantastic. All right. What I will do now is to create a few folders, right? So this is going to be a vanilla JavaScript HTML project, but I want my code to live in the source folder. This is the folder that we will be serving as our using our web server. I'm gonna switch over here because I'm running out of juice on the other computer. Right. So source, that's where our application would live, and then I'm gonna add another folder that I will call specs. And I like the word specs, so that's why I use it. You can call it tests if you want. Doesn't really matter. Now, in that folder, I want to create a new subfolder that I will call features, and another one that I want to call units, like this, and that should give us this structure. So we have a source folder, and we have specs with subfolders, features, and units, like this. And what else? Right. Now that we have set up those things, I want to make sure that Cypress is properly set up. I want to finish off that installation. So I'm just going to say npx Cypress open. And there is another way to do that. You can just say .known modules .bin Cypress open. It's going to be exactly the same thing. And again, you will see something like this on the screen. Welcome to Cypress. Thank you very much. Hold on a second. There we go. Oh. Right. We want to thank them very much for setting this up for us, but we want to delete all the example files. They create a lot of example tests for us. We don't need them for anything, and therefore we want to click on this no thanks, delete example files, like this. Bye, thank you very much. We're good to go. What's going on? There we go. Right. So now everything is empty. We can quit this like this. It has verified Cypress. You should see something like this on your screen. And yeah, we are on 8.3.1 at this point. In terms of releases, should be good. All right, let's open this up in our editor, and this is where we are now, and I can just move this out of the screen, have that visible at all times. Right. And so what we want to do at this stage is to focus on the Cypress JSON file, and it's a JSON object. Inside of that, we want to add a few keys. The first one will be the base URL. You've seen me do that before. And we add HTTP localhost 3000 in this case. That's what we want. We gotta add another one, and that is also new to you. We're gonna use this Chrome web security. Web security, Chrome web security, right? And we're going to set that to false. And what that does is that it allows us to to access any domains or any data without running into course issues. Not sure we will use it in this project, but it's also good to have. And then we're gonna add a new setting that you haven't seen me do before, and that is the key that is called integration folder. Integration folder, and we want to set the integration folder to .specs /features. You see what integration, there we go. Now what this will do is it will no longer look for our Cypress tests in this integration folder, but rather in the specs folder features. And why do I want to do it this way? Because I can. No, because I think, I'm kidding, because I think it's better for me in this particular project to store my tests, or to group my tests inside of one single folder, in this case the specs folder, and have my features in the features subfolder and my unit tests in my units folder. Okay. And also in my source folder at this stage, I would like to just create a new file. I'm going to call it index.html. Every website, every web application needs an index.html one way or another. And for those of you who are using React, you know that even React, of course, needs to load some sort of a resource, and that will be the index.html page. And here I just want to create an index, an HTML5 document like this, and add an H1 and just call it address book here. Oops, or whatever, right? I just need very simple stuff to add that somehow. However, in my source folder, I would like to, let me clear this up. I would add another one subfolder. So I'm going to say mkdir in source that I will call just JS. That's where we will store our JavaScript files when the time comes. So we will create two files, one that I will call app.js, and the other one will be called address book. And I'm actually going to use Pascal case on this one. So we're going to say address book.js. Going to be it's going to be called address book. Right. Fantastic. So again, at this stage, we want to see something like this. We have the Cypress folder. We don't need this folder anymore. We have the Cypress JSON with package JSON. We have the specs folder with features and units, and we have a source saying index.html and address book and app.js and so on, right? So what else can we do? Well, we can do a lot of things. First of all, we need to focus on our package JSON file for a second. And in that, package JSON. In that folder, first of all, we can review all the dependencies that we've been using. They are installed there. We have some other metadata about the project itself, but here we can also add another key that is called scripts. And here we want to add a script to start our web server. So we're gonna do that, and we will tell superstatic to start. Superstatic is one of the dependencies that we that we added recently, and we want superstatic to serve a specific folder. That would be the source folder, or SRC. But we also want this guy to run on port 3000. By default, superstatic runs on port 3474, I think, but we want this guy to run on port 3000. Why? Well, because I want you to know that you can configure this stuff. So that's what why I wanted to change that. So let's see if this works. Right? We just go over here. We take this step by step. Right? We implement small parts just to configure our setup and our environment, so we can start coding at some point. We can say yarn start, or npm run start, or npm start. I think, I don't know. I haven't used it for a long time. And we see that superstatic is not installed, because in my infinite wisdom I forgot to install that. And is that because my documentation says I shouldn't install it, or did I just make a mistake here? No, I just made no, my documentation doesn't say that, so I need to update that. So I need to install superstatic. Simple enough. Yarn add d superstatic.
Your gist that you had open earlier actually has that step in it.
Does it? So I just missed it.
Yeah, you weren't following the order. It's after making the directories. It's in a different order.
Oh, there it is. There it is. Right. Okay, because it's not a development dependency here. It should be, actually. It should be a dev dependency. I wrote it myself, so I made a boo-boo. Anyway, let's just add it. There we go. Should be pretty fast. Or not. Wasn't that bad. So now we do yarn start. Visit localhost 3000. Let's do that. Let's bring the browser up. Do localhost 3000. And here we have the address book. Yay. Okay, so that worked. Not bad. Let's stop it. And how do we stop it? On a Mac, you say Control-C. On a whatever else computer, I think it's Command-C. And you stop the server. Shouldn't be a problem in itself. Okay, so let's see if we can add another script that will be important for us. And that would be a script that we will name test. And the test script will execute Mocha. So let's start with that. Mocha. And I've seen that I don't follow my instructions properly either, but it doesn't matter. We will have a file with a little bit of configuration that we want to preload. We want to tell Mocha that before you do anything else, we want you to use a specific file. And that file will be called spec helper, and it will be placed inside of the specs folder, directly under that folder. So we're going to say specs / and then it's called spec helper, helper.js. And that's just, I'm going to create that file in a second, and I'm going to place a little bit of code in there. Now, another thing that we want to do is to use this. We have a question here from Twitch. What happens if we don't add these to the dev dependencies? You can add them to main dependencies if you want. If you deploy this and they are in the dependency list, when you install those dependencies on your remote server, they will be installed in the production environment, and that might be too much because you won't be running this kind of server or the test frameworks or the test tools on a production environment. So it's just it will take too much of unnecessary space or unnecessary much space. So that's why you try to only include the dependencies that you will actually use in production. All right, good that I could clear that up for you. All right, so we will be using this package called bdd lazy var. So we want to tell Mocha to use that. So it's a flag -u for use, and we will just say bdd lazy -var. And according to the documentation, if you want to use this with Mocha, you want to bind all the objects that this package creates into the global object, and therefore you need to include it this way. That you just say bdd lazy var / global, and then you just want to pass in this flag that says recursive, which means that if we have any tests in any subfolders, you want to execute them, and then you just want to say that you want to finish it off. Once we are done, we want to stop Mocha. So you have to pass this in --exit, because otherwise Mocha will just continue to run, and you don't want that. And then you just tell Mocha what folder you want to execute, and that would be the specs/units folder. That's where we're going to place our tests. Specs.units. Let's see. Mocha file specs spec helper. Use bdd lazy var recursive spec unit. Right. And since I didn't create that, so I need to create that file. Touch specs, and then just say spec helper.js. Spec helper.js. Right. Let's create that. And now, just so we can see the tree. That's what I forgot to do last time, just to create the spec helper. Otherwise, it's pretty much the same thing, right? So let's see if we can execute this command. So yarn, what was it I call this? Test, right? Test. And that should just say 0 passing. We don't have any tests. That's why this is saying that, and that's all in order. We are good to go. Okay, more configuration, people. We're gonna make sure that Cypress works for us. So we're gonna create another key, and we're gonna follow a little bit of best practice, or practice that is promoted by Cypress. We're gonna create this CI open key, which will just execute one single command, and that would be the Cypress open. And we will add a new one, and you've seen me do this before, those who are following the Work the Web program. So it's going to be Cypress, and the value will make use of the start server and test. So we will say start server and test. We will tell start server and test to execute the start command. We will say start. That is the equivalent of yarn start in your CLI in your terminal. Then we're gonna tell start server and test to wait for HTTP localhost 3000 to come alive, and let's not misspell that. There we go. So this package will now wait for this URL to become available and fully load for us, or be loadable. And the last thing we want to do is to open Cypress, and that will be the CI open command. That will be the equivalent of yarn CI open. But we don't want to run yarn CI open until this application has been started on this particular URL. So 2 commands. It's It's one too many, in my opinion. I would love to be able to run this directly from here like this, but that's not doable. This will render errors. You're just gonna have to take my word for it or experiment with it if you want. But I've did, and it doesn't really work. So what I will do now, I will not test run this command, but rather create a new file in my specs features folder. And I just want to call this is going to be my first acceptance test, and I will just call it user can visit the application.js or something. Or sorry, I'm actually going to add a .feature.js like this. All right, let's head over to that particular file. And here I can add a test. I can add a describe block if I want, but I can also add a context. The context in this case will be a when a user visits the application, and I can add an it block. Come on, don't give me that. There we go. Sorry about that. When a user is the page, the page is expected to display the header, for instance, header. And here I can just say CI visit, not crypto, for God's sake, CI. Give me a, there we go. Visit the root path, which it will be that. And look, I have my Copilot activated, so I can just say this. The H1 should contain address book. We can say contain, or we can say contain text. It's a chai assertion, so it's the same thing that we will be using later in our unit test. But never mind that. Now we just wanted to have a very simple test. We have this index HTML. We should be able to say yawn Cypress like this. It starts the server, make sure that localhost is up and running, opens this up. I can execute this file by clicking on this, and this should now visit my application. And I misspelled something. Yeah, of course I did. Thank you for correcting me, guys. There should be an R in address book. Oh, I'm kidding. I did this deliberately. No, I did not. I misspelled this. And this one is passing. We're all good to go on this one. Okay. All right. So, so much for that. And if you guys are coding along at this stage, you have, of course, made several commits. You didn't follow my lead, just to code along and not committing, because that's not a good practice. Let's stop this, do git status. We have shitloads. Oh, just not even a git repository. There you go. So git init, right? Should have done that a long time, probably. And I need to get lost, and I can just say, what should I say? Echo node modules. Okay, here we go. Node modules, and we want to push this into git ignore, of course. Right, there we go. And now we don't have 13,000 files to track, but rather 13. We do git status, and we have that git add this CIAM. This is our abbreviation. Adds basic configuration for of test, etc. That's a very bad commit message, but who knows, right? Who cares? I can live with that. Copilot is pretty cool, actually. It's a bit overambitious sometimes, but it is. It's got a comment on Twitch that it's cool. I love it though. Anyway, there's a few other things we need to set up. You remember I did create this spec helper file, so we're going to focus on that one just for a second. So here we want, as you remember, I said that the spec helper will be preloaded by Mocha. So here I want to add a few things that I will need for my test execution to be smooth, and so that I don't have to include a lot of requirements in every test file. So for instance, I know that I will be using the expect notation, so I can say const expect, and I can require that from Chai, but I can also add another module that is called use that I will be setting up in just a second. I also want to include sign-on from sign-on, and that's pretty straightforward. And I also want to include sign-on Chai from the sign-on Chai package. My Copilot really loves me, but I want to use sign-on Chai in my Mocha setup. So I say use sign-on Chai, but I also want to bind the expect module and actually the sign-on module to the global object. And so let me, because I need to I need to tell you what global is in just a second, but let me just write it up first. So I want to say global expect equals the expect module that I just required, and also I want to say global sign-on to be sign-on, right? And then you might ask, what the hell is global? Well, you see, our tests will be executed, our unit tests will be executed in a node environment. They will not be executed in a browser, and therefore we will not have. So in the browser you have the window object, which is something that you simply don't have in Node environment. In Node, what is called a bit oversimplified, what is called a window object, in Node it is called global, pretty much. And you can see that if you open up Node console, and that is done in your terminal. You just type Node and hit enter, and you are inside of an interactive JavaScript shell, right? So you can do basically everything here. You can execute any code. 1 + 2 = 3, right? You can say let name equal Thomas, right? So you can create variables. You can do a lot of stuff, right? But you can also access the global object, right? And the global object contains a lot of things. Pretty, not exactly the same things as the window object, but still, it does include a lot of functionality. We don't need to talk so much about the global object at this point. The only thing I want you to focus on that it exists, and we can extend it if we want, and that's exactly what I'm doing. Let me just get out of here. That's exactly what I'm doing here in this by binding or adding an attribute called expect to the global object, because then I can call on it in my other tests. Right. So now that we have this very basic setup, I also want to create a test file for my address book class that I will be using later, one way or another. So let's just create one in specs units, and we're going to call it address book .spec.js, and we're going to focus on that test for a short while. We're going to open up this thing, and here, in order to test something, the test file needs to be aware of the function or the unit it's about to test. So we're going to do a require. So we're going to say const address book equals, and that would be require. I'm actually going to type it up. Require and a string, and then dot because we have to move one folder up, and it's not here yet, so we're going to say dot again slash, and we're going to now choose source. We're going to do slash again, JS slash, and we're going to choose address book. Now, my Copilot did pre-fill this for me, but I want you to see that we have to navigate to this manually. Thank you very much for hanging out with us. Good night. Have a good evening, of course, and welcome back anytime. Now, it's time for us to write a little bit of test code. So we're going to say describe, of course, because that's what we do. We describe something, and the thing we will be describing will be the address book. Address book, like this, and then we want to create something called a subject, and subject takes a callback, so it needs to be a function. So it will be parentheses, an arrow function, and then we will say a new address book, like this. We're going to instantiate a new object of the address book in our test. And so here I'm going to say it is expected to be an object. That's one test that we could add to this. And again, those it blocks, they take two arguments. First, it's a message, and then there is a callback. It's very important that you always create this it block as an empty thing, and you consider that there are actually two things being passed into this function. Again, a message, and then a function itself. And so here we just want to say expect, and then $, subject, and it's supposed to be an object. So what we're doing here is we're basically asserting that if you do type of subject or type of whatever has been stored into subject by executing this new address book, will be an object. That's one way of testing this, but we can also write another test where we say, sometimes the Copilot is there we go, that it should be it should be an instance of the address book class, right? So we can say to be an instance of address book, right? And here we can say expect again, oh well, I can actually do that. Right, expect subject to be an instance of. This is a matcher that comes from Chai. So there is a very good Chai documentation online. To be a object, that's one assertion. To be instance of address book, that's another assertion. And so if we run this one, and again, we haven't written any code yet. So if we run this, this will of course fail for us. And again, we're not here to develop or write too much code, but we're here to see if our testing frameworks are actually properly set up. So we will run this test, and we will get those two errors saying that address book is not a constructor, and this is pretty much just simply wrong. Okay, so what we need to do is to basically go into the source folder and the JS subfolder and open up the address book JS file and add a very simple class definition. So we're just going to say class address book, and that will be just an empty class. We don't need to add any code into this yet. So we're just going to add two curlies here. But what we need to do is to export this class so that we can read it in our test file. We're going to say module.exports equals address book, like this. And now since I've added this code to this file, and this file, which is the test file, actually reads this, then we have connected those two together. I also want you to pay attention that my VS Code is configured the way that if I'm using the expect keyword and I don't have it included, it will auto-include that for me. And your IDEs might be configured in a similar way, and therefore you need to pay attention to that. We don't need that code for anything. So I'm actually going to remove that. And why don't I need it? Well, because I am preloading everything that is done in the spec helper, and therefore I don't need to include that in every test file. However, my IDE is not smart enough to sense that, so I need to remove that manually. Let's rerun this test again. And at this stage, since we have this class definition, it is pretty much an empty one, but it lives up to those two expectations, meaning that if we instantiate a new class of the address book, it will be an object, but it will also answer positively on that particular question if it is an instance of the address book. Okay, and just to make things even more complicated for you guys, and this was a big headache for me when I was learning this. Now, it's all nice and dandy at this stage, saying that we can use this address book class here in our test environment. But look at this. The way we use JavaScript in a web-based application, and this is vanilla JavaScript and simple plain old HTML. The way we use that is that we have to require our code, our JavaScript code in our HTML file, right? So let me just do that. Script and then, okay, sorry about that. Script source, right? And I want to include the JS and address book at this stage. I will later on include the app.js as well, so I might as well do this, okay? But look what happens now when I start the application. I'm going to do it by running Cypress. we will probably get an error on this one. Let's see if that actually happens. Yeah, we did get an error, and it says the following error originated from your application code, not from Cypress. Thank you very much. Module is not defined. You see, you can take my word for it. The same error will appear if we want to execute this in the browser using yarn start. If we now just go to I had this open before. If I go here and I reload this page, you will see in the dev tools that there is a silent error in the background saying module is not defined. Okay, so why is that? Well, because in the browser you can't really use module export for anything. This is simply code or JavaScript code that does not exist in the browser. And one of the objectives of this challenge is to understand, at least scratch the surface of the differences of executing Node in your browser versus executing executing JavaScript in your browser versus executing JavaScript in Node environment. There are two different environments. It's the same programming language, but they do behave. It behaves differently depending on where you execute that. This is simply not possible to use in a browser. Now, in order for this to be testable, or if you want to pursue this path where we run tests in Node but execute code in the browser, we need to condition this line of code. Line 5 can only be executed if we are outside of the browser, and there's a very small hack that can allow us to do that. So we can say if well, my Copilot is actually pre-filling this for me, but I will do this manually. Castras, see you around. Thank you for hanging out with us. I'm about to finish off soon as well. So if we have a module, we're looking at the module, and that was what was not being defined for us, right? If it's anything else but undefined, and you can actually execute the module exports command. If that is true, then we want you to execute this command. Otherwise, we don't want you to do anything. Therefore, we will not have an else block on this if statement. And this might be a bit hard to understand, but if we are in an environment where module actually exists and module exports is a possibility, then we want to export this module. Otherwise, we don't want to do anything at all. This line of code will make it possible for us to both use this class in the Node environment, but also use it in a browser. And now, if I would go to localhost 3000 and open up the dev tools, we don't have any errors anymore because that line of code is never hit. Okay, and so that was about that. And finally, I think I am closing in at the end of the line. Yeah, I think this is the end of the line. At this stage, we are pretty much set up for writing some code, apart from one single, however not so insignificant detail, and that is, again, do you remember local storage is an object that is bound to the window window object in our browsers, and there is no such thing in a Node environment. So again, if we just open up Node and we do, local storage like this, which is something that we can do in the browser, there is no such thing. And even if we just try to check if this is part of the global object, it is still undefined. So our next task will be, and I don't know if we're going to do it today or not, but our next task will be to mimic local storage or fake local storage functionality if we want to write this this application using tests that are executed in Node environment. But that's going to be saved for another day, because our hour and a half is up. All right. So, Anya, did you learn anything today?
Yes. It's still, I guess, as always, I've never heard about that before. So, and I've not had to use it, so it still feels a little bit like abstract, but definitely now I know where to have a look if I need it for the setup, I guess.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Carl?
There was good revision on setting up Cypress and Mocha, and I'd never heard about this module.exports thing to consider. That's totally new to me.
Awesome. Because not many people are testing vanilla JavaScript, so I guess that's why. But I think it's a good repetition, and it's a valuable skill to have. I would say. I hope, at least. It was valuable to me at many times. All right, Mike, did you pick up anything valuable today? Not sure if Mike is with us. So let's go over to Carmen.
Yeah, definitely. Like you mentioned, it's pretty similar to RSpec in the Rails world. So I was trying to coding alone, and I got lost a little bit with the spec helper. So I didn't add my spec helper file, so I got the error where spec doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a good practice, I guess.
Cool.
But I fixed it, of course.
Sure thing. And remember that we did, or didn't we? I don't know if we did. If I didn't, I will add that now. There's a link to the gist, to the documentation.
Okay. This is, I mean, I never heard about chai or Simon chai. I have heard about mocha, but chai, it's new to me.
Cool. So in the Work the Web channel, I just added the link to the documentation itself,
cool.
right? So you can follow along that, of course. And
Thomas,
yep, go ahead.
when you were saying you hope that we initialized our Git repository and have been committing, it is at such a fast pace that if we are coding along with you, that there isn't really time for that.
All right. Remember that whenever you code along with me, it is totally okay to say, Thomas, stop for a second. Never worry about that. I have so much things to say that I just want to boom, get it all out. But it's really totally fine to ask me to slow down or to stop. But it is what it is. I know it can be hard.
I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
I really like the tree module that you're using in the terminal. Did you install that with Homebrew, or do you know how you do tree?
Okay. So it actually it's I don't know what computer. Are you on a Linux or a Mac?
I'm on a Mac.
On a Mac, right? So on a Mac you have to install that. Tree command on.
So I'm on Ubuntu, but I also had to install it. I actually saw that today and also installed that today.
Right.
Oh, it's Cool. Okay, I will look into that.
So yeah, so you just do brew install tree.
Okay.
Yeah, on a Mac. So that should be, and on but I thought at Ubuntu that was built in, isn't it?
I've got Ubuntu 20.04 and I didn't have it.
Okay. All right, there you go. I like it a lot. It's it helps me, especially in coaching. You know, I can show people that you know the folder structure, but but anyway, you can just brew install tree. That should work. Right. Okay.
I have another good question. I noticed that when you were setting Cypress, you set up along the feature spec before setting the Unix spec. Is that just because you wanted to know if Cypress was running?
Yeah, that was the only reason for that. The entire thing was I mean, this entire step, this part of the development process is only about setting up the environment, not really coding. So I just wanted to make sure that Cypress is properly configured, and in this case, which is different from how Senf Köln is set up, or many of my other projects is being set up, my feature files, or you know the end-to-end tests are in the specs folder under features, all right, and I'm not using the integration folder, which is a setting that I set up here in the Cypress JSON. I'm repointing Cypress to another folder where it's supposed to look for those tests. The default setting is Cypress integration, but I wanted to use specs features. So again, since this setting was a part of the you know of the ball game, and also usually you just want to you want to make sure that your tools are working. So writing a very, very basic, almost a bit of a nonsense test is appropriate, just to make sure it works. And it's the same thing with this spec. This is not really testing anything. Well, the instance of address book might be testing, but there's no real value in this test. This one is also just to make sure that Mocha is properly set up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Good stuff.
So another quick question, I promise. So basically, having sorry. So the structure that you're following, specs, feature, unit, is it's a preference. It's a personal preference, and you like to do it this way because it's gonna resemble to Rails, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
So. Is this like a good practice? Or I love it, by the way.
Well, if you love it, then it's probably a good practice. It's okay, I've been I like writing tests because of where I come from in terms of Rails and so on. But I also know that even in JavaScript, it is, well, especially in JavaScript, it's been so hard to find a flow that works, because people are overcomplicated things. There are it's a myriad of not only frameworks, but also the ways you use certain frameworks. And I've been looking for the simple stuff, right? As I said, I think I spoke about this in the previous talk about software craftsmanship, and I usually talk about this, that the do the right thing at the right time, but also simplicity, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done. That's a very essential Agile principle, and I want to have as straightforward setup as possible without too much fuzz. And I know that you guys are fairly new to this, and I'm presenting a flow that, yes, it's I came up with this and it works for me, but it is actually much simpler than many other alternatives, in my opinion. But at the end of the day, it's of course up to everyone to make up their own mind what they want to use or not. But if unit testing in combined with acceptance testing, or rather vice versa, is a priority of yours, then this setup is a good one.
Yeah, I agree. Honestly, it's really easy to follow, and yeah, thank you.
Good stuff. Good stuff. All right, folks. I think it will do it for us. We've been running a little bit over time, but well, we did start a little late. It was great having you around. I will not be around tomorrow. I have a birthday party for my 20-year-old son. That is actually birthday is today, but we'll have a party tomorrow. So I won't be joining you tomorrow afternoon, but I see you Tuesday. Okay.
Okay. Have a good one tomorrow then.
Thank
Right,
you.
thank you.
Thank you
Party
very
hard.
much. I'll try. I bought him a 20-year-old whiskey, so he's gonna.
Oh,
Ooh.
nice.
Yeah. So
Ah,
yeah, and then some other stuff. But
like
he will get a bottle of scotch.
Nice.
in Africa, that never happens, Thomas.
That you live to 20, or that you get a bottle of whiskey.
That you get a bottle of whiskey from your dad.
You don't? Well, I'm Polish, so I should give him a
Never.
bottle. I'm Polish, so I should probably give him a bottle of vodka. But I'm breaking traditions. I'm breaking traditions.
Yeah.
All right, guys. See you around. Thank you very much. And Twitch and YouTube, thank you for hanging out. See you again. Cheers.
Bye.